Hey, besties. Welcome back to Allie the Doula, your birth bestie for real talk. If you're new here, hi, I'm Allie. I'm a birth doula, mom of three, and the friend who will always help you make a birth plan without letting you spiral. Today, we are talking about birth planning, but in a way that doesn't make you feel like you need a color coded binder and a 12-page document to have a baby. Because somewhere along the way, birth plans got a reputation for being stressful or unrealistic or something that you only make if you're trying to control everything. And that is not what we're doing here. We're going to be making calm, flexible, realistic plans that help you feel more confident, not more anxious. So let's start with what a birth plan actually is, because I think this is where a lot of the confusion starts. A birth plan is not a script. It is not a guarantee. It's not a list of demands. It is absolutely not a legally binding contract that the hospital signs in blood when you walk in. You are not handing it to your nurse like, here you go, follow this exactly, or I will be calling your manager. This is not the vibe that we're going for with these birth plans. A birth plan is simply a tool for communication. It helps your care team understand your preferences, your values, and what matters most to you going into birth, especially when you're in labor and not in the mood to explain your thoughts on lighting, monitoring, and who's allowed to touch you. When you're having contractions, you are not going to be giving a presentation on what you do and don't want. You're going to be busy focusing. You don't want to be like, okay, everyone, if you could gather around, I'd like to review my birth vision board. No, that's not what this is. Your birth plan speaks for you when you don't feel like talking. So I like to think of it as a little cheat sheet for the people walking into your room. Like, hi, here's what matters to me. Here's what I prefer. Please read this before asking me 17 questions while I'm trying to breathe through a contraction. And honestly, most providers appreciate it when it's clear and simple because it helps them support you better. I always tell my clients that your birth plan is a way for me and everyone in the room to know how to support you and your partner best. And having a birth plan does not mean that you're trying to control everything. Yes, the goal is that during birth, you are in control, but there's a difference between being in control and controlling everything in the room. A birth plan means that you care, and it means that you want to feel informed. And it means that you want to walk into birth feeling prepared instead of like you're just winging it and hoping for the best. And listen, you can be flexible and still have preferences. These two things can exist at the same time. So you can say things like, this is what I'm hoping for, while also understanding that birth sometimes has its own ideas. I always say that a birth plan is less about controlling the outcome and more about shaping the experience, because you deserve to feel respected, heard, and supported no matter how your birth unfolds. So if you've been avoiding making one because you're scared that it has to be perfect or super detailed or aesthetically pleasing, then just know that it doesn't. It can be a very cut and dry, typed or handwritten birth plan on a single piece of paper. It doesn't have to match your nursery theme. It doesn't have to have the perfect font. It just has to be clear in how you and your partner want to be supported and the things that you do and don't want. The main thing to know with birth plans is that the more simple they are, the more power they hold. Okay, so if birth plans aren't bossy manifestos or control checklists, why do they get such a bad rap? Let's talk about it, because I think somewhere along the way, people started misunderstanding what they're actually for. Some providers hear birth plan and immediately brace themselves. And it's usually not because they don't want you to have a good experience or they don't want to hear your thoughts and how you want to be supported. It's usually because sometimes birth plans have been presented in a way that feels rigid or unrealistic. Think super long documents, very specific demands, zero flexibility, things that don't match the setting or the medical situation. So instead of feeling like a helpful guide, it can come across like a list of rules. And birth just doesn't work well with rigid rules because babies like to do whatever they want. Birth is unpredictable. Situations can change. and babies have their own timelines. So when providers see something that looks like there's no room for adjustment, then they worry that it's going to create stress or a conflict later on. But the important part is that having a birth plan is not the problem. How it's approached is what makes the difference. I've had multiple clients who bring their birth plan to their provider during their last trimester, and they come back and say, well, my OB loved my birth plan. I've also had others where they come back and their OB or midwife had certain things that they just wanted to tweak a little bit on the birth plan. That is why it is so important to be collaborative with it. So when a birth plan is clear, it's realistic and flexible, then most providers are actually really open to it because it helps them support you better. The goal with a birth plan isn't to control every moment. It is to communicate what matters to you most. And tone matters too. So if it's something that's framed as, here are my preferences, that feels collaborative, which is why my birth plans, at the top, they say birth preferences, not birth plans. If it's framed as, this is what will and won't happen, then it can feel very rigid and like you are trying to take full control. And that might not be your intention. We want this to be a team effort. We want support to be there. We don't want people feeling like there is a lot of back and forth or even arguments about what may or may not happen. Your providers are not on the opposition. They are a part of your support team. So making sure that your birth plan represents that is so important. One of the best ways to approach bringing your birth plan to your provider is to do it before you're in labor. Bring it to one of your prenatal appointments in your third trimester and just talk about it with your provider. Say something like, I've been thinking about my preferences for birth and I made a little plan. I'd love to go over it with you and hear your thoughts. That opens the door for conversation instead of being confrontational about it. And it also helps you understand what's realistic in your specific birth setting, because every hospital, birth center, and provider has different routines and policies. With that, I always want to remind you that some policies are very old school and might not be something that aligns with your birth plan. So there's a difference between things that are policy and things that are very much proven to keep you safe and keep baby safe. And just make sure that you have a good understanding of that. Another tip is to keep it simple. Providers do not need a 5-page document telling your whole life story and how you want your baby to come into the world. Usually 1-page bullet points, clear priorities is the key. And if it's over 1 page, that's okay, as long as it is very clear and very broken up into sections where every provider who comes into the room can look at it, scan it quickly, and understand everything that you're wanting. And remember that if you are having a hospital birth, then the staff that you are meeting and who may be in your room with you, you may have never met them before. So having your birth plan in place will also give them a chance to get to know a little bit about you without you having to have a whole conversation with them while you are laboring. So it's kind of just another way to introduce you to your staff without having to schedule a coffee date. Your birth plan should be saying, hi, this is who I am. This is what matters to me. And this is how you can support me and my partner. And honestly, most providers want to do that well. They want to support you and make you confident in them. They just need to know what you're hoping for. And also remember that flexibility is not weakness, it's preparation. So you can say, these are my preferences, but I understand that things may change depending on the situation. That sentence alone shows that you are informed and realistic. And at the end of the day, a birth plan should create collaboration, not tension. When everyone is on the same page going into birth, then it makes the whole experience smoother for you and your partner, as well as everyone in your room. And a stress-free environment is always the goal when it comes to having a baby. So now that we've talked about why birth plans get a bad reputation and how to approach bringing one to your provider, let's talk about what actually goes into a birth plan, because I think this is where people either overthink or accidentally turn it into a novel. And remember, we are going for clear and helpful, not overwhelming. So we're going to focus on categories that are going to help shape your experience. The categories I always include are environment, labor preferences, pain management, pushing and delivery. I always have a little section in there on a cesarean as a just in case, and then after delivery and baby care. And we are going to dive a little bit deeper into those categories in just a little bit. These are the kind of things that help your team understand your priorities. And here's something that's really important. You don't have to have an opinion on everything or even know what you want on your birth plan when you're creating your birth plan. Your birth plan isn't a test. You don't get points for filling out every section. I always tell my clients that you want to make sure that the things that really matter to you most are in the birth plan. So if your number one goal is to stay mobile, then that needs to be highlighted on your birth plan. If your main goal is to avoid certain interventions unless medically necessary, then that is what we need to make sure is in there. Your plan should reflect you and your wants, not what you think a birth plan should look like. And please, please make sure you keep it simple. So ideally one page or a page front and back. Bullet points or little checkboxes are your best friend. And this is not the time for paragraphs and writing out long explanations. Because no one in labor wants to read paragraphs. The nurses and all the other staff are there to focus on you. So they want to be able to quickly scan something and understand it very clearly. So it needs to be clear, simple, and easy to read. This is a communication tool, not a creative writing assignment. And that is exactly why I created a simple birth plan template for you guys, because figuring out what matters can feel overwhelming. All right, so now you know what to include, but I don't want you leaving this episode thinking, okay, great, now I have to figure this out all on my own, because you don't. So let's talk about how you can actually create a birth plan that feels simple, clear, and totally doable. Because again, we are not writing a dramatic manifesto to present at the hospital front desk. Your birth plan will be clear, simple, and easy for your team to glance at while you're busy, birthing a human. So if you're sitting there thinking, okay, cool, how do I actually make one? I got you, because I've walked through this with so many families and myself. And honestly, people don't need something complicated. They just need a starting point and a little guidance on what's realistic and helpful. So that's why I created a birth plan template that you can download on my website. I wanted something that felt simple, friendly, not overwhelming, and actually useful to providers. Not one that makes nurses sigh before they even walk in the room. My template will walk you through your preferences in a way that keeps things flexible because, again, birth is unpredictable, and we don't want you feeling like you failed if things shift. We want you informed and confident, not rigid and stressed. So if you're like, yes, please, just give me something that I can fill out without overthinking, then you can grab that on my website at allieravendula.com. And if you do download it, my biggest tip is to fill it out with your partner or support person, because they're a part of this too. And it helps them to understand what matters to you so that they can advocate for you if you're busy focusing. Also, it's a really good way to start conversations that you might not realize you should probably be having. Like, what are you each most nervous about? Or what are the things that mean the most to you in the immediate postpartum period? Birth planning isn't just paperwork, it's preparation for the experience. I had a client previously who, during labor, they got to a point where they were not able to make decisions for themselves. And because of the birth plan that we had created and that their partner was very much a part of, the partner was able to step in and make those decisions, knowing exactly what their person wanted. And this is why we love a good birth plan. I also want you to hear this part very clearly. A birth plan is not a concrete plan for how your birth will go. It is about understanding your options so that you can make informed decisions in the moment. Because the goal isn't a perfect birth. The goal is a supported and in control and a beautiful birth. If your birth team knows what matters to you, then they can care for you better. And that is the real power of a birth plan. Most birth plans, including the one that I offer, are broken into a few really simple categories. At the very top, you'll usually see a space to share your general goal for birth, something like wanting a calm, peaceful experience with minimal interventions and the ability to make informed decisions. This isn't about being poetic, it's just giving your team a snapshot of what matters to you. Think of it like saying, here's the kind of environment that helps me feel safe. The next section is talking about the environment. It is all about the vibe that you want. Things like wanting a calm, quiet space, dim lighting, or a soft atmosphere, wearing your own clothes. None of this is high maintenance. It's just about helping your nervous system stay relaxed. And relaxed equals labor works better. I always tell clients, this is not about making it Pinterest worthy. It's about making it feel safe. Next is labor preferences. This is where you think about how you want to move through labor. Options might include freedom to move and change positions, using tools like the bath, shower, or a birth ball, and limiting routine interventions unless needed. This section is less about saying no to things and more about saying, let's keep this as physiologic as possible unless we need to pivot. Pain management and pushing preferences is where people sometimes get stuck because they think that they need to decide everything ahead of time. But this section can literally just say yes, no, or I'm not sure. You're allowed to be undecided. I always tell my clients that for this, you don't even have to fill this part out because you can decide in the moment how you are feeling. You might see options like trying different pushing positions, letting your body push when it feels ready, and using different comfort techniques. Also, most people get very overwhelmed at deciding if they do or don't want an epidural. And in your birth plan, you don't have to decide. A lot of that is to make sure that your support team knows whether to ask you if you want one or to not even bring it up. Because sometimes, especially in the hospital setting, you might hear over and over again, do you want an epidural? Do you want IV pain meds? Are you ready for your epidural now? But if you don't want one, or if you don't want to even be offered one, then you just need to put that in your birth plan. Remember that this is about flexibility, not locking yourself into one experience. Then we move into what happens once baby is here. So things like immediate skin to skin, delayed cord clamping, feeding preferences. This part helps your team respect those first bonding moments. And it also might feel like a blur in those moments because things can go a little bit quickly. And usually you are very much in baby bliss trying to realize what just happened and that there's now a baby on your chest. So having these already on your birth plan will help the providers around you support you in that immediate time, how you want to be supported. And also making sure that your partner is on the same page and knows what you want in that immediate postpartum period will help. Because again, you are going to have a fresh little baby on you and you are not going to be wanting to answer a million questions. So if your partner knows what you want, then they can answer them. Most plans also include a section for unexpected situations, like a cesarean. So this includes things like if you want your partner with you in the OR, how you want the atmosphere to be, and if you want to do things like immediate skin to skin or breastfeeding in the OR. Including this doesn't mean that you expect it to happen. It just means that you were prepared no matter what direction birth takes. So when you look at a birth plan and you see all of these sections, don't think, I have to control every detail. Instead, think, these are just conversation starters. You're not writing rules. You're helping your team understand you. So, as we wrap up today, I just want to remind you of this. Birth planning isn't about controlling every outcome. It's about walking into your birth feeling like you understand your options, you've thought through what matters to you, and you've created space for your voice to be heard. That's it. It doesn't have to be long or perfect, and it definitely does not have to look like something that you found on Pinterest at midnight. A simple, thoughtful plan can go a really long way in helping you feel calmer and more prepared, and helping your team support you in the way that's right for you. If you'd like help getting started, you can download my birth plan template directly from my website at allieravendula.com. It's designed to walk you through these decisions in a way that feels doable, not overwhelming. And if you're someone who would rather talk it through than stare at a worksheet, I offer something called a Doula Chat with Allie. It's a 1 hour session where we sit down together, talk through your preferences and questions, worries, and I help you build a birth plan that actually feels right for you. Sometimes it's just easier to process it with another person, and that's exactly what that time is for. You can find that on my website as well, if that kind of support would feel helpful. Before we wrap up, I want to give you a little sneak peek into what's coming next. In the next episode, I'll be sitting down with a prenatal and pediatric chiropractor for a really fun, real-life conversation about caring for your body during pregnancy, supporting babies, and what this kind of care actually looks like, because I know there are a lot of questions out there. She's also a mom, a business owner, and she's been part of my own pregnancy and postpartum journey, so this really felt like sitting down and catching up while talking about things that matter. We ended up having so much to talk about that it turned into a 2-part conversation, so you'll hear part 1 next week and part 2 right after that. Make sure you're following the podcast so you don't miss either one. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If this episode helped you, share it with a friend who's expecting, or save it for when you sit down to start your own birth plan. And remember, you are doing much better than you think. I'll talk to you soon.